Hey, and a very warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast with me, your hostess, Joanna Hunter, metaphysical teacher, spiritual life and business coach, published author, and the high priestess of the LightWeb, a spiritual technology that will change your life. This is the place to be to talk everything under the LightWeb, from consciousness, relationships, to money, to spiritual business, and everything in between. Hi, it's Joanna here for the Into the LightWeb podcast, and we are on the Gift Lab series, and I am joined by my lovely friend and online client, Wendy Williams. Hello, Wendy. Come and say hi and tell people what it is that you do in the world.
Hello, Joanna. I was so happy when your team reached out to me to do this, and I'm very pleased to be here on your podcast. I am an entrepreneur, multi-passionate person, and a spiritual teacher. And I help people step into their authentic power through building a spiritual foundation and creating freedom by having independent income
Oh, I love that.
as well. Yeah, help people get started doing that online.
Fantastic. I love it. So I can't wait to jump into this conversation.
It's going to be good.
Yep. How are you, lady? How are you? How are you?
I'm good.
What have you been
Yeah.
up to? I feel like let's have a little catch up before we jump into our podcast.
Yeah.
What have you been up to? Catch me up. What's happening in your life? Where are you in the world, first of all? Let's start with that.
Well, I've had a lot of things happen since you and I coached one-on-one. It was January 2018. So that
Oh
was
my God. Yeah, that's a long
3
time.
years ago.
No,
Yeah.
4 years.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's not
I know,
right.
that's insane, right?
It's like, what? Yeah. So, what have I done? In a nutshell, I lost everything in 2019.
Okay.
It was like low of lows, 4-year relationship, all my earthly possessions, my sanity. I mean,
Oh my
like,
goodness.
it was, I feel like the universe was giving me 2020 so that I knew what to do to get through it before 2020 happened for the rest of the world.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It was that bad for me personally as it was for the world a year later. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was the first time, and I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, so I can diagnose mental disorders. It was the first time in my life I thought, oh, this is clinical depression. like
Oh my
ooh,
God.
I
Right.
I've been sad before, but it was never like this. So I just for about 9, 10 months, I pulled out every tool, spiritual, energetic, psychological tool in my toolbox to heal myself. And then 2020 happened and life changed for everybody. And George Floyd was murdered. And I, at that point, was calling myself a leadership coach. And I said, oh, yeah, now's the time to lead, Wendy. You have a lot of white friends that respect you and they don't understand what's happening. So step up and lead. And so I started on my personal Facebook wall posting educational pieces about African American history that's not in the history books. And I don't mean all the, great things Black people have invented. I mean the reality of the long haul impact of slavery and what has been happening to African Americans as a group since then, beyond the highlights of, the Martin Luther King movie and, all the other things.
Was it you that posted that comparison of grandparents purchasing property?
Yes.
Yes, because I thought that really hit me, and I thought, of course, because the white privilege is generational. It's not just in this generation. It's like it goes back, so it has this deeper economic impact. I thought that was fabulous.
Yes.
Obviously fabulous to be able to have that insight, but not fabulous for people of color, right? Because I mean,
Right.
that was the harsh reality of the fact is that their kids are, getting excluded because of their zip codes to education
Right.
and things like that. But really, their grandparents were really forced to live where they lived.
Yes.
And then they never got the privilege that went with it,
Yeah. And speaking of the housing thing, just recently, within the last 4 weeks, there was a news article that was going around on the internet about a Black couple that had a beautiful, very expensive home. And when they had it appraised for its value, when they wanted to sell, it was one price. And then they removed all of the pictures of themselves, and any indication that there was a Black family there had another appraisal, $500,000 more valuable. $500,000 more. That
That's so
was
crazy.
this year.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that people don't know unless they're told, because for some people, that's never a reality. Even for the people being discriminated against, very few would know that they're being discriminated against, right? It's a hidden thing, and then you're criticized for not being more taking care of yourself better financially. Well, there are hidden hits to doing as well that are not public. Yeah. So,
It's
and
big,
also,
it's huge, and it's rife.
yes, yes, absolutely. And then I wrestled with my own anger and my own indoctrination, and I think one of the big epiphanies for me was realizing that I will no longer define myself through the eyes of a group of people that don't know me and don't understand me. And that was probably the biggest shift for me after months of education and realizing um, the profound lack of knowledge and understanding. And I thought, why in the world would I see myself through that lens? It just didn't make any sense. And I just was like, fuck that. I'm, I'm taking my own self-definition back, and this is ridiculous. And I felt like I had, kind of popped a bubble or broken a spell, actually. And it was a big relief and part of my turn in taking my power back in general with my life after all those hits. And then things, it was a reminder that the more active I am publicly, the more things happen. I mean, gigs were coming my way. There was a lot of activity. People wanted me to speak. People were paying me to do things that they'd never done before. And I'm like, Wendy, you've always known this. When you want something to happen, just go make some things happen that people can see, and then energy starts to build. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I love that you said it was like a spell that broke, because that's what I think it is, isn't it? I mean, that's what it is. It's like
Yes.
we use our words to cast spells with, right? And we create these. But do you know what I loved? And this is one of the things that within the sort of Black Lives Matters movement and all of that is that it really comes back round to, although there is discrimination and that is a real thing, there is a way to actually transcend it. And that is by taking that personal power back and saying,
Yeah.
you don't get to define me.
Yeah.
You don't get to tell me how, when, and what it should look like. I get to do that for myself. And I think, when you've been indoctrinated for such a long time to say, well, you cannot do that for yourself, to say to make those decisions for yourself. No, we are going to decide that. But actually, and I think it's the same, and the same thing is also for white people. It's exactly the same. It is that moment where they take back their power too. It's exactly the same pivot, except with a person of color, they've had a lot more spells cast, if you like.
Yeah.
And they're taking, back their power. But the power move, that's the bit where you decide, well, actually, it's me that decides my fate in life.
That is absolutely true. And I'm going to say something that I think is really controversial in the metaphysical circles. Is when all the racial stuff started happening, and within metaphysical circles, especially with people that called themselves spiritual teachers, I saw a lot of racial flare, online flame wars. Like they were fighting and getting angry and all this kind of stuff. And what I realized about that journey from being oppressed in conscious and unconscious ways daily, and in your family lineage, and then taking your power back is, and this is what I know because of my own counseling and being trained as a counselor, people can't jump from point A to point Y. In between that is healing of trauma. Before the healing,
increments.
yes, before the healing of trauma, a safe place to be understood and for the pain to be acknowledged. And so, it's spiritual bypassing to preach the, take your power back and, switch the thinking and all this kind of stuff. I saw that harming so many people that weren't in the place to do anything with that yet. Because all of this healing work has to take place first. When you have when your psyche and your ego is Swiss cheese because you've been fodder, you have to fill that in before you can be strong enough to grow into something new. And I think that part of the dialogue is missing in public. And I know it intimately. And like you just said, I almost called you Deanna, who was my original spiritual teacher. Wow, that is a very interesting Freudian slip. You're very important to me, Joanna. You're a pivotal person in my life. But what I think it's missing from the dialogue, especially from spiritual teachers, it's the compassion piece that's missing, to understand that people have to, people don't understand that before they can let go of ego, this is the enlightenment conversation, you have to build a strong, healthy ego first. Like you, Joanna, there is no way you could accomplish everything you have accomplished unless you had a strong enough ego to believe you're the person that can do these things, right?
Absolutely, and the self-belief.
Yeah, and a lot of people try to do what they know they want to do without having that in place. And they're way ahead. Oh, get rid of ego, no ego. I want to be fifth dimensional, blah, blah, blah. No, you got to actually take action on your own behalf and demonstrate self-love before you let go of shit. Because you have to build up that strength first. And it's ego level.
It completely. And do you know what else as well? It's like it comes back around to my work, get selfish, right? Like you have to get selfish first. Like you have to figure out what it is that makes you tick. And you have to develop that tender inner voice. Because if you are going to try and switch it up, have the courage to get to that switch point where you take your power back. But the whole way there, you're calling yourself names, you're dissing yourself, you're telling yourself that you're stupid for even wanting it, like it's like pushing that boulder up the hill. Every step that you take feels like taking 20 steps because they're so heavy to take.
You're literally digging a hole while you're trying to make the way up the hill, and you keep
Yes.
sliding down the hole. I mean,
Yes.
it's
Totally.
ridiculous. Yes. And
Totally.
what I was saying earlier is this pattern of the path of human healing and empowerment is true regardless of who you are. It's not unique to Black people. It's what women go through. It's what men go through, not having the permission to deal with their emotions and be
Yeah.
cannon fodder for wars, and the one person that you're supposed to depend on financially, and all these other societal programming things. And it's for anybody that's been a victim of anything. It's human. It's the path to healing from human trauma, regardless of who you are.
Mm, for sure. And yeah, and it is that it all just rendezvous back to the self. And it's a lesson that Skylar teaches that's like, there you are. Like there's no getting away from you. There you are. Like whether you're in the midst of some big drama, well, there you are. Whether you're in the midst of having the most winning season of your life and you're like, oh my God, everything I touch goes to gold. Well, there you are. There is no getting away from yourself. And
Yeah.
that's where the healing has to start, with the self.
Yeah. And I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. Nobody can make things different for you.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, if I had enough money, this would be like that. I've been in the situation where I've had no money, not enough money to do what I want to do, and then years later experience having more money than I ever thought I could possibly have, and living a jet set life, and having an Italian boyfriend, and living part-time in Venice, Italy, and all of this, super glamorous, amazing things. And having all of that didn't fix the thing I thought it would fix. Yes, it made life easier. Yes, I was able to do exciting things. Yes, it's absolutely a benefit. But the problem I thought it would fix is not what it does. No. No.
Yeah. It's there you are, right? It's like the money does help a lot because it takes away a lot of day-to-day stress and strain. But other than that, if you thought it was going to make you slimmer, happier, like
Yeah.
I like bougier, whatever you thought it was going to make you as a person, no, it will just literally make things easier
Yeah.
to, because obviously if you have a problem, it's easier to fix some in this world right now with the way it is easier to fix it with money. But other than that, you don't, because you just end up there you are. Like it's the
Yeah.
same, it's like there is no getting away from you, and you need to do that inner work. There's
Yes.
like there is no escaping that piece.
And
And
it
I
it
love
actually
that.
yeah, it actually amplifies the inner wounds that haven't been healed. They become bigger
Yes.
and brighter, actually. I think that's why stars burn out, that become super famous and, very wealthy, and haven't done that work, and then end up harming themselves or taking themselves out, because having a lot of money and everything you thought you wanted just amplifies what's not healed.
I love that you said that because I feel like money is an amplifier, which is why I feel like money is of source. Money is of source because it is an energy, it's an extension of source, because source's energy is to expand and amplify, and money does that. But I've always maintained that if you're an asshole with money, you can now be, congratulations, you can now be an even bigger asshole.
Yes!
You
You're
know?
having a bigger impact now. Woohoo!
Exactly. And it's like, but if you are a genuinely beautiful person with money, that amplifies too. It just amplifies what was already there. And it comes back to that lesson of there you are, and and there is no escaping us. Talk us through a little bit more, Wendy, about you going through that dark night of the soul in 2019 before everybody else is going through, because I felt like I was really ahead of that curve, because I felt like that was my COVID, if you like, was when I had my multiple organ failure burnout.
Yeah.
And I literally, I mean, I was stripped bare. I lost my home. I had to sell my businesses. I had to sell, like, I literally was like, one minute I was this person, and then the next minute I was trying to figure out who the hell I even was. And it was a huge thing. So talk us through your version of going through that. And I really feel like a lot of leaders went through that before the absolute, let's just call it a shit show of COVID hit the world.
Yeah.
But I feel like in a way that it was for us to, I kind of got through my multiple organ failure and was like, I didn't die. This is good. Like, this is good. And like I realized I was facing a lot of my worst nightmares, and realized that I was bigger than them and I survived them. And did you have a similar experience, or how was your experience of going through
I'm
kind of this loss?
Well, I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm still recovering,
Okay.
but I'm on this upward trajectory that is um, demonstrating to me the inner power and inner strength that was acquired through living through the devastation in my life,
Mm.
and choosing and being able to pull myself back together and heal. Um, because my understanding of the world and my understanding of myself has changed so much through it. Even when I was in the middle of it, I didn't regret being in it,
Mm.
because of what the gift that was in it. So, I had a fiance, the relationship fell apart. I was a digital nomad, and my earthly possessions, which were highly valuable, I had an international shoe collection that you would not believe. and, and I still hurt in my heart that I no longer have my pieces of artwork. I'm kind of a Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City,
I
and
feel you.
I purchased shoes that were so unique. There's no way to recover these little pieces of artwork. Gone. Just gone, because I couldn't keep them. And I was a digital nomad, so I literally had set myself up to not have a home, but then I didn't have a home when I crashed and burned and needed to curl up in a ball, and had to lean into the generosity of friends that I've known for 30 years in my family. And so I was in a really low place from a really high place of all this international travel, Italian boyfriend, living part-time in Venice, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and doing whatever I wanted financially in that big glamorous lifestyle. I was truly jet set and things were great. So I lose everything. In the process of the tail end of losing everything, the core of the nail in the coffin for my old life was when I lost my relationship. And this is what happened with that. I was My heart was torn apart, desperately waiting for another person to love me.
Mm.
And then I realized that I had outsourced the job.
Mhm.
And I said, oh my God, I didn't realize how, I didn't realize that I didn't love myself actively. I didn't realize that I spent so much energy believing someone else could do it that I wasn't doing it. And the big epiphany was if I actually loved, honored, and respected myself, I would not have been in the situation in the first place.
Mm. That's so juicy.
That was on me. So after months of, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you being this way? And then to have that realization
That must have
was
been like a slap in the face, a punch in the gut, and liberation all in one deal.
exactly, that is exactly what it was. And it was so deep and so clear.
I can feel it. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And that was the gift in all of it, was to see so clearly my lack of self-respect and lack of self-honor.
Mm.
And since then, I felt like, well, at first I felt like a toddler. No, more of an infant learning to crawl. Okay, not even walking. I was an infant learning, flailing on my tummy and learning to crawl and actively demonstrating self-love, self-honor, and self-respect. And now, at this point, I feel like I'm a toddler getting into trouble, running around the house. I'm
I
still
love
not,
that.
yeah, I mean, I'm still not, the 7-year-old learning softball or cricket or
Mhm.
wherever, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. And I'm not the adult training for the Olympics, but I'm really, really clear the muscle that I'm building. And I have enough common sense and life experience to know what it really looks like and feels like. So I know exactly where I must practice
I
and
love that.
what I'm um, building up inside of me and what I'm choosing to embody. And for me, this is the one thing that's really common for spiritual entrepreneurs. I'm not motivated by money. I've always said that, and I give away services and, I all this kind of stuff. And what I'm growing into in this very moment is loving myself enough to create safety for myself and honoring what I want,
That's huge.
because I actually love the experience of having a lot of money. Like, it felt really good when I had, uh, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to spend every month. That felt good. I've had that experience. And I cannot get myself to take action to recreate that when I'm focused on the money.
Mm.
But now I'm like, it's time to demonstrate, and this is what's happening to me. I am in a process of internally healing my divine masculine energy.
Mm.
So the
Beautiful.
masculine role in the world is the breadwinner. I mean, we all know every individual is different. It's not the same for everybody, but it's the societal role. Well, my inner breadwinner was not active at all. And there is an energy about, and then again, this is a gross generalization, but it's common for a lot of people. When a man is in love, they want to protect and provide. They have that desire. A lot of men don't even want to get married until they feel like they can provide for a family, provide
Yeah.
for a stay-at-home mom that's going to have a kid, right? That they don't have to go to work while they're raising a young family. Honorable thing. That's and again, that's not true for everybody, and it's not true for all genders and all that kind of stuff. And it is a societal norm. It's a societal standard in the cultural soup most of us are swimming in. So what I noticed was that my divine masculine was atrophied. It wasn't being exercised. It wasn't divine. It wasn't being expressed through divine virtue. And that I had a lot of healing to do with my relationship with men and my relationship to masculinity in general, because my experiences throughout life have been traumatizing and not positive. But I'm very much committed and understand that my authentic power comes from my soul. It comes from divine source, and the expression of divine source is divine virtues, right? Embodying those virtues and expressing
Absolutely.
those virtues. And there are a suite of divine masculine virtues. And I believe everybody needs to be whole. We've got to do both, the
Yes, for
feminine and
sure.
the masculine, right? And
And I think
my,
that's, you know, that's
yeah.
a big thing I see in business for especially spiritual entrepreneurs. We have this abundance of divine feminine energy. We don't even know what to do with it. We have so much of it. But what's so sorely lacking is the divine masculine energy. And not only that, what I think you've hit the nail on the head is that there is an open rebellion and rejection of the masculine because we've been traumatized in corporate. We have been traumatized in the workplace. We have been traumatized in the marketplace. We have been traumatized in childhood. Money's for men, not for women. These sort of indoctrinations. And of course, we want to be an open rebellion to that. And that is very natural and very normal, except we've just shot ourselves in the foot instead of actually like looking at that and saying, okay, well, I have both masculine and feminine energy inside of me, and I can create this beautiful, powerful balance of where the masculine does not seek to dominate, because that's the problem, is where we have had trauma from masculine energy dominating and not working in synergy with feminine energy.
I call that the wounded masculine. And we've all been subjected to the leadership from the wounded masculine perspective,
Completely.
the domination and control, and uh, yeah, that's it, yeah, exactly what you
I
said.
think it's a huge thing for people to navigate through. Let me just take you back to a little bit there that you said that really, really resonated with me when you said, well, I felt like an infant, not even a toddler. And, you know, when I was getting a little bit emotional and teary there, because I remember coming home from the hospital after my multiple organ failure and writing in my journal, extreme self-abuse got me here.
Mm,
And I realized that only extreme self-care would get me out of and would actually put me on a path of healing. But the problem was that I didn't even know what extreme self-care would look like beyond a bubble bath. And I knew that the bubble bath wasn't going to cut it, you know, like all my organs had shut down in my body, you know, and so I knew that the bubble bath wasn't going to cut it. It would be pleasant, but it wouldn't, it would literally tickle the surface of such a deep problem. And I remember that feeling of vulnerability, of feeling so out of my depths with loving and honoring myself. So like kind of Dolly daydream, Dolly dimple of like, I do not know where to even begin with this journey. And that took me really, and the gift of that was obviously learning that journey, which I then put into my book Get Selfish. But it was that not knowing, and that moment of where you're like, okay, this sucks. I am the common denominator, and every time there's drama, and every time there's a problem in my life, and every time there's something really shit, there I am.
Yeah.
And that was, that's the punch to the gut. But in the moment, you also realize, as you're being punched in the gut by that, you also realize the liberation is there, because if there you are and you control yourself, then you know that you also have just been given the key to actually shift that.
Yeah.
But when you don't know how, and that's such a place of vulnerability, deep vulnerability. I love that you highlighted that, because it just took me right, I could feel the tears in my eyes. It just took me right back to that place of like thinking, what now?
Absolutely. And for real life, feet on the ground, I'm a human being, practical steps, if anybody is listening and they find themselves in this place. I've heard self-love. Well, what the hell does that mean? I want to share what I learned and what I did, because I'm so much stronger now. Still a baby, but I'm so much stronger now. The first thing I did was started to feed my mind healthy food. So it was mandatory for me, because I was so depressed, to consume, and thank God bless YouTube. I forced myself to consume hours every day of positive personal growth content. I was listening to Impact Theory. I was listening to Oprah. I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk. And I turned off the news, no news, because that's negativity programming
That
and
was
fear
one of my
programming.
first.
Yep.
No magazines and no news. I had to let go of all of that.
It's one of the things my mother taught me, and she taught me this because we were living in a very racist neighborhood, and I was a baby. I think I was maybe 5 years old when she told me this, and I never forgot it. She took me by the shoulders and said, "Wendy, there will always be people around that will want to put you down and criticize you. Don't join them."
Ooh, shivers.
Right? So I learned, okay, I had to feed my psyche healthy stuff on a regular basis. And it was a diet and programming. I was reprogramming my mind. And I was very conscious that I wanted to do that, to make my psyche stronger, to make myself feel better, and to remind myself of all of my own power and, everything that we can do for ourselves as human beings, right? So that was the one thing. Then I was taking my mother's advice. No more self-criticism. No more of that negative. And I had just had to put my foot down. For me, it was like my waking consciousness was going to talk to my inner dialogue, my inner critic, and say, no more. This is discipline. Nope. I'm getting the ruler out. Hands will be smacked. There will be no negative self-talk. None. It's no longer acceptable. I had to put my foot down. So that requires mental discipline, but I was just not having it. I was already so downtrodden, but no, just
Exactly. It
absolutely
is.
not.
And I think this is, we have a module in the Unity program where it's called Fire the Critic, Hire the Cheerleader. And you basically fire your inner critic and you hire a cheerleader instead, because how else are you going to achieve in your life if you're not even willing to cheer yourself on, you know? But imagine trying to achieve in life when everything you do is like front page news for your inner critic, and it's never good. What you're reading on that front page is always like how badly you did or how awful you are or how, that's such a pushing the boulder up the hill energy. And
Yes.
that was huge for me, is getting rid of that inner critic and realizing that the more I fed my inner critic, the bigger my inner critic got. And when I decided to cut off the source of my inner critic, which was me, and take radical personal responsibility and actually give that job to the inner cheerleader and say, okay, well, girls, shake your pom-poms, because we're gonna go places, and I need an internal team that's gonna help me to go places.
Yes.
And reframing you're useless or you can't do that negative chat into you can do this, you got this, from the
Yes.
cheerleader was huge for me.
It is huge. And let me tell you where it got powerful. And again, this is one of those areas that people don't talk about. I chose to build courage
Mm.
to do things differently that I was afraid to do, which is courage, taking action when you're still afraid. And I chose to build emotional courage. And I
Mm.
chose to radically experience the trite line of no negative talk and being positive. So what I did was most people say that they confront their fears. I learned to love my fears. And let me tell you exactly what that looked like. I was paralyzed with fear, absolutely immobilized with fear. Irrational, made no sense, contradictory to the person I know myself to be, contradictory to things I've done in the world. I was afraid of things that I'm really good at doing. Like, I'm a great
Mm.
speaker. I was on stage at 4 years old. I've never been afraid of speaking. I've spoken at conferences and I love teaching and being in front of the room and running workshops, but I couldn't get myself to be visible for my business,
Mm.
even though I've been on TV. I mean, in lots of different ways. Okay. So it didn't make any sense. And I was clear that I was tapping into the saboteur and the resistance that's deep in my unconscious. This was not something I could just think my way out of. I was even tapping into trauma that has no word or thought because it was incurred before I had language.
Okay.
Okay. So it's just stuff you feel, but you can't think yourself through. So I decided to develop the courage to love my fears. And later, a couple years later, I had a friend that told me something so magical. She said, "Your genius is in your darkness."
So
So
true.
most spiritual people like to whitewash, kind of spiritual bypass the hard stuff or reject negativity. That is not wholeness. And wholeness
True.
is the key, and authenticity is the key to your personal power. And so I learned to love my fears. I would literally say, okay, frightened, this, that, or the other thing, have an inner dialogue. It is okay that you are here. It is okay for you to come out. It is okay for you to be in the light. I'm not hiding you anymore. You have a right to be here. come out. And I would move my hands like this because energy moves up and out of the body when it's stuck. It moves up and out. A lot of people, while doing shamanic work, will feel like they're throwing up through the mouth, or it will run up through the top of the head, or you start breathing. It's because the energy is moving up and out. So as I was talking to myself, I'd move the energy. It's okay for you to be high enough in my conscious awareness. You, I'm safe, you're safe. You can be here. You have a place here. I love you. I was talking to my fear in the same way I would talk to a traumatized child, with love and comfort and acceptance. And then I started inner dialogue with it. And every time I did it, it was standing in front of a wounded childlike aspect of my psyche that I didn't know existed. It always had a gift. And
Always.
always at the center of every fear, especially the most debilitating, especially the parts that stop you the most, is a precious, precious aspect of yourself that is not being expressed because it's being protected by the fear. And so when you're willing to love the ugly and the disturbing and the scary, you come into wholeness by loving it enough to where it's safe to reveal its gift.
I love that. It makes so much sense. So Skylar teaches all energy just wants to be acknowledged, however we've labeled that energy. And that goes along, and this is why I say never push your fears down or suppress them. Like, say, hey, I see you. And even just that, hey, I see you, that the fact that they're seen, the fact that they're acknowledged, it immediately begins to the transforming energy immediately begins, because you're no longer rejecting. We're either in resistance or we're in flow. Well, we can only be in wholeness if we are in full flow. And so the fear is always resistance, and fear loses its power the minute we invite it to join the flow. Hey, I see
Yes.
you. Hey, I see you. I get that you're there. It's, but I'm not going to get bent out of shape that you're there.
Yes. To love it. That's the radical part of it. And what I realized when I was doing it with myself is that's what we need to do on a macro level with humanity. So right now, especially in the United States, but all over the world, people are digging in and having ideological fights and resistance and blame and finger pointing, and you know literally families are being torn apart because of different political
Viewpoints.
beliefs and
Yeah,
viewpoints. And the thing that we hate, the thing that we think is ugly and awful, needs to be loved.
for sure.
Needs to
I
be
mean,
loved.
this
But
is
it,
a big part of the get selfish message, which is
yeah,
really like, I've always said, I really truly believe that world peace, all of the things that we desire as human beings, the peace, the love, all of it is possible. But all bets are off until you can learn to love yourself. Because if you're in there having a war in here, like, you're never really, like, you can say that you care about the environment, but really at the end of the day, you're just trying to get through the day because you're hating on something that's going on inside. All bets are off for you being a loving energy to the outer world,
yeah,
because you're not capable, because you're not fully loving on the inside.
yeah,
And I feel like this is the key, the key to everything that we desire as humanity, the peace, the ends of sexism, racism, all of that is coming from self-love. Because once we truly come into wholeness, the thought of hurting other people becomes abhorrent.
exactly. My favorite repeated phrase is happy people don't hurt other people. We also learned from Brene Brown that wholehearted people have the strongest boundaries, which is why I came to completely release the dogma of get rid of your ego. You cannot have appropriate boundaries that demonstrate self-honor and self-respect if your ego is weak.
Mm.
You have to have a strong ego to care enough about yourself to say, how I'm being treated here, it, it's not part of
Not
what
good
I
for me.
choose for my life. It's not what I choose for me. So even when I say, like, I felt like I was demonstrating radical love by loving fear. And I truly believe that we need to lead with love. But if we lead with love without a strong ego, then we accept behaviors that are unacceptable. And I learned from Brene Brown the difference between shame and guilt. Shame being you're bad, you're wrong, you're not right. Guilt being that behavior is unacceptable and you are always worthy.
Mm.
Big difference, right? So we
Yeah.
can't love what's being done that's harmful to others without having a healthy ego enough to have boundaries around it and to still say this behavior is unacceptable. And I love you and I see inside of you that you are bigger than this and that you also need some things. Can I help you with what you need?
That's huge. That's huge. I love this conversation because it just encapsulates so much of Skylar's teachings, and to hear them in your wording and in the way that you have arrived at this. I actually, when I first moved online, I didn't teach on the ego at all. And the reason I didn't teach on the ego was because I really, really dislike the narrative that you have to get rid of it. For me, it has always been an integration. And Skylar teaches that in three parts, that the ego has three functions. The first function, it knows it will fail in that function, but the first function of the ego is to convince you that you don't have one. And it knows it's going to fail. But it's little lie, big lie. It's playing a game with you called little lie, big lie. So the little lie is you don't have an ego. And of course, you know it's BS. So you're like, something smells funky here. I think I've got one of these egos. Well, as soon as you got the ego, the ego now is hoping that you won't spot the big lie. So the ego is the facilitator of separateness and the illusion of separateness, the illusion of being an individual in this context of living on life on earth. So what the ego then begins to whisper in its second function, begins to whisper to you, get rid of me. Because if you get rid of the ego, you will never know wholeness. And since its job is to keep you in separateness, not wholeness, it then performs, and it does really well. And lots of people live their entire lives just trying to shed this weird appendage that becomes the ego. And so the final function of the ego is when you choose to integrate the ego and the ego becomes healthy. And the ego is the facilitator of separateness, but now you are its master. Before, you were its slave in a way. You were its underdog because it was underpinning your life. But when you choose to step in into your mastery of life and really truly master life, then the ego becomes this ally of what you are about and what your individual experience is about. And these are the beautiful teachings of Skylar of the three levels of the ego. And so for the first 3 years, I was like, this is a can of worms I don't want to open. And I love that you have been on this self-love journey and came to the same conclusion that the ego needs to be integrated and loved in order for it to be healthy. And I really truly believe that, because while you're an open rebellion and rejection of it, you're an open and rebellion and rejection of your wholeness as a human being, because it's so part of the human experience.
Absolutely. The ego is closely aligned to masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is the expression of the divine masculine. And from my perspective, the ego is like the age of Aquarius, or the energy of Aquarius. It's individualism within a collective. That is the very definition of the human experience on Earth. The reality is that we're all one and we're all connected in the core of who we are as energetic spiritual beings. And we're having an individual experience because we're in the plane of relativity. We learn by comparison. We learn by understanding and living the opposite of a thing.
Yes.
That's what Earth School is. So the ego's required to facilitate that experience. Like, you can't get away from it. It's what makes you human. The key is maturing it into divine masculine virtue and understanding the wholeness, just like you said. It's
Beautiful.
not something to fight, just like men are not something to fight. It's something to love and integrate in elevating it to the highest, most beneficial, most loving, fulfilling, joyful expression.
Mm. I love that. Stick a fork in it. We are done. I think this was such a beautiful, powerful conversation. Wendy, tell people where they can find you online, where if we're going to put all your links and everything in, so it's going to be no problem for people to find you. But if someone's just listening to this and they're just raring to go before looking at the show notes, tell them where they can find you. Where's your favorite place to hang out on the internet?
Oh, well, you can find me at wendywilliams.me, and then all my social media links are on that page. And you can see me in my business as the Soulmate Agency and the Soulmate Academy, which I'm building right now.
Amazing. I love that. I love that. That is fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, I will absolutely love this conversation. Thank you. You're a blessing, Joanna. I love you.
Oh, I love you too.